Hello and welcome back to World Talks, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Sally Jastrzębska. The EU has just rolled out its 18th round of sanctions against Russia. This latest package targets over 20 Russian banks, bans dealings with the Russian Direct Investment Fund, blocks any use of the Nord Stream pipelines and tightens the price cap on Russian oil exports. But the big question is, how effective will these new measures really be? To help unpack that, I'm joined by Tom Keatinge, Director of the Centre for Finance and Security, the Royal United Service Institute. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So, EU diplomats called it the strongest package so far. But after 17 rounds before, what sets this one apart? Why should we believe it will have a greater impact?
I think there are two questions there. The first one is, yes, I think it is a strong package. But of course, it's a strong package 3.5 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And there are many elements of this, particularly, for example, the further removal of Russian financial institutions from the international system that should have been done 3.5 years ago. So I think the EU, we should welcome the package, but at the same time, we need to query why it's taken so long to take some really basic measures that should have been taken 3 or so years ago.
Mm-hmm. Right. And after, 17 rounds of sanctions before this one, has the EU conducted any sort of transparent assessment of their actual impact on Russia's war capabilities, or are we just sort of operating on political momentum?
Well, that's a very good question. So I have the opportunity to visit Brussels regularly, and I always say, where is your impact assessment? Because I think actually many of the sanctions that have been issued perhaps have marginal use. So some of the more kind of technical sanctions, the ones that really make a difference are the ones that restrict the ability of Russia to raise revenue to fund its military and to procure the resources that it needs, the microelectronics and other military equipment. That's where we should be focusing. And so this package should be welcome because it does very squarely focus on the resourcing of the Russian military. But we need to squeeze that as much as possible and continue to squeeze that. And of course, then we have the question of implementation. It's all very well having smart ideas for sanctions, but you need to then make sure that actually what's written on paper is put into practice.
Mm-hmm. Right. And does this package sort of include any measures to close loopholes or sort of crack down on sanctions evasion through using some other countries?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons why the EU can be congratulated on this package is it closes a very particular loophole, which is for 3.5 years now, EU member states have been able to import refined oil products like diesel from places like India, which is made from Russian oil. So we have indirectly been funding the Russian military by importing those products from places like India. That is an embarrassment, and it's good to see that that's being closed. The other thing is that there is a major oil refinery in India, which is substantially owned by Gazprom, I believe, and therefore that has now been sanctioned as well. So there have been some glaring holes in the sanctions system, and those have now been fixed by this new package.
Mm-hmm. Right, but the package does not have Washington's backing. So considering the central role of the dollar in U.S. financial systems, right, can this oil cap truly be effective?
So you're right. The Washington administration has done nothing on Russia sanctions since Donald Trump was inaugurated in January. But I don't think that should be an excuse for the EU and indeed the UK and other G7 allies to keep going hard against the Russian economy to punish the Kremlin for its illegal invasion of Ukraine. So, of course, it would be great if the Americans were alongside the Europeans. That may happen. Of course, Donald Trump spoke just under a week ago from the Oval Office about the possibility of introducing secondary tariffs. It was his usual kind of word salad of an intervention. But basically, he's given the Kremlin 50 days to start properly negotiating a ceasefire. So maybe the Americans, by the end of the summer, will be back in the game.
Right, now we have about 45 days left. But do you think that we'll see this happen, or is it just rhetoric with Donald Trump?
I fear it's just rhetoric. Of course, let's wait and see. I mean, if I was one of the poor citizens of Kyiv or any other city in Ukraine right now and sitting under 500 drones a night, I would be asking, why 50 days? I mean, we've had 3.5 years of this. Donald Trump has had several months in which he's tried to talk sense to Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. So it's a real shame and, frankly, I would say a disgrace that the White House continues to offer Vladimir Putin the benefit of the doubt. So let's see in 45 days' time what happens. I'm afraid I would not be standing around waiting for positive news, though.
Right. And I wanted to sort of zoom in on the issue of cohesion and united front when it comes to sanctions, because German media outlets reported a few months back, right, on a meeting in Baku, Azerbaijan, between German political figures and Putin's people, showing that, you know, there are these backdoor channels that still exist despite the official policy. So do you think that this undermines the EU's authority? And I mean, how seriously shall we treat this kind of stuff?
So I think the first thing to say is that it's pretty remarkable that the EU has managed to stay united. I mean, obviously, Hungary and Slovakia are the bad boys in all of this, holding up packages. The 18th package, you know, has been ready to go for many weeks, but unfortunately, Slovakia, I believe, have been holding that up through, frankly, for selfish reasons. So the cohesion is there. I think what we probably want to start moving towards is a situation where, rather than having these big sort of set-piece sanctions packages every 6 months, we can be more nimble. If you look at the country that I'm sitting in, the UK, obviously the UK now, outside the European Union, can issue sanctions whenever it wants to. And it's been much more dynamic. It's issued more targeted packages. It's issued packages perhaps to show the EU the state and the art of the possible. So I think it's great that there continues to be more or less cohesion on sanctions decisions, but I think we can be more dynamic. When it comes to dialogue with Russia, I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to have dialogue at some point. In a way, that's what Donald Trump is trying to do. So I think complete silence is not going to be productive, but we need to balance, let's say, the stick of heavy sanctions with the carrot of conversation. But of course, no decisions should be made without the Ukrainians being fully on board with whatever those decisions might be.
Absolutely. Well, and the sanctions also target over 100 Russian ships in the so-called shadow fleet, right? I mean, so of course I was wondering if this will curb Russia's ability to keep exporting oil. But we've also got some new data, some new information saying that Greek tanker operators are likely to continue shipping Russian crude. So, I mean, how shall we make sense of this?
Yeah, so of course the shadow fleet is not really in the shadows at all, is it? It's getting bigger and bigger and is the central way in which the Kremlin and Russia exports its oil to countries that choose to continue to buy it. So I think the way we deal with this is we've been very focused on the vessels, on naming vessels, and of course that should continue. But around the vessels, there is a whole infrastructure. There are the owners of the ships. There are those that sell ships to the shadow fleet. Maybe that includes some Greek companies. We've seen in the UK a gentleman sanctioned for doing that. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is to stop countries like India and China feeling that they should buy Russian oil. And that's why the threat from Donald Trump last week, the bill that Lindsey Graham, the senator in the United States, has been talking about, could be very important, because essentially what those are saying is, if you choose to buy oil from Russia, then if you want to trade with the United States, we will put 100, 200, 500% tariffs on that trade. So you have a choice: buy oil from Russia or trade freely with the United States. And that's the kind of thing I think we should be calling for the EU to do. And interestingly, when it comes to trade tariffs, as I understand it, you do not need 100% unanimity amongst EU member states. You can operate on a qualified majority basis. So these are the kind of things, the more creative things we need to be proposing. Yes, we can carry on sanctioning tankers in the shadow fleet, but that's not going to fix this problem. And by the way, neither is lowering the oil price cap.
Right. And could you expand on that, the lowering of the oil price cap?
Yes, of course. So the oil price cap works if everybody operates within the traditional shipping system. But as we've just been talking about, there is a shadow fleet. And the whole point of that shadow fleet is to operate beyond the reach of G7 countries and outside the oil price cap. So if you have a shadow fleet, the oil price cap basically is rendered redundant. Now, that's not to say that the oil price cap has no value. I think statistics show that it has some value, but it cannot be the central tool in trying to reduce the revenue that Russia earns for its illegal war in Ukraine from its export of oil.
All right. And let's perhaps, reverse the situation and take a look at how this new package of sanctions can affect global economy or some EU member states themselves.
Well, I mean, I would argue that it really is not going to have an effect on EU member states. I mean, I think one of the things that we still fail, and in fact, I think the Prime Minister in Poland is one of the very positive voices in this regard. But one of the things that many leaders fail to realize is that in talking about sanctions, Russia realizes that circumventing sanctions and avoiding sanctions is existential for that country. So Russia really views itself as at economic war with the West, with Europe, and it will do anything and everything it can to avoid the sanctions. If you look at the response of people like Dmitry Peskov or Sergei Lavrov in Russia to the latest sanctions package, to the threats from Donald Trump, they just shrug their shoulders and say, meh, we know what we're doing, we know how to circumvent sanctions. I mean, one thing I would point to is there is even a university program that's just been set up now in Moscow about how to circumvent sanctions. Can you believe it? It's actually an academic program at a university now. So I think we need to realize that if we want to restrict Russia's ability to fund and resource its illegal war in Ukraine, we need to be willing to take some economic pain ourselves in Europe. We need to recognize that we are funding, still with the purchase of gas and so on, we are funding Russia's war in Ukraine. We are funding the bombing of cities like Kyiv every night. And if we don't take some pain ourselves on our own economies, then we are complicit in what the Kremlin is doing.
Absolutely. So let this serve as a conclusion for our talk. Tom Keatinge, thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TV.